Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here on the porch at the Copeland Community Center. I want to introduce to you our guests today, Jerry and Barbara Hotmire, and we're happy to have you with us, and just relax and pretend like we're on your porch talking.
Thank you for the invitation, and we'll try to relax.
Well, I know you don't remember most likely when you were born and where, but why don't you tell our viewers?
Go ahead.
Well, not when. You don't have to say when.
Oh, yeah, that when is not good. Although it's okay. I was born in a little, near a town in Indiana called Deerfield, Indiana, in a farmhouse, and close to Union City, Indiana.
And were you actually born at home?
Yes.
And I was born in a hospital in Muncie, Indiana. We've lived in Indiana most of our lives up until retirement.
And then I know you've done some traveling, but we'll talk about that more.
Yes.
And you went to school in that area as well, if you've lived there.
Yeah.
And what about furthering your education?
Well, I went to Purdue University, and that was a pretty good experience. And I also took several classes at Taylor University, which were very invigorating. Classes start with prayer, which is a whole different setting than a state university. So it was good.
Barbara, what about you?
I worked at Taylor University, did desktop publishing, graphic design, and while I was there I took classes. Got married when I was 17, so I didn't go to college before marriage, but took a lot of classes at Taylor. Didn't graduate, but enjoyed it.
And why don't you tell your viewers about how you met? I think this is interesting.
Well, I met Barbara when she was 15, and we had a blind date. Her brother was my roommate, and he set us up. We went to a play at university, and then the next day we went roller skating, and that's where I lost it, so to speak.
I was impressed with him because I was probably a sophomore in high school, and he was a senior, or he was in college, and that impressed me. He was pretty handsome too, I thought.
So I bet your future brother-in-law didn't know he was setting his sister up to be.
He did not.
To be his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
So he was my best man. Mm-hmm. So it's good.
And how long have the two of you been married?
60 years.
That's one successful blind date, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
It was a good one.
Especially being so young, too.
Mm-hmm. It was okay to get married young in those days.
It was God that brought us together, though.
Yeah.
And some of our viewers may not know about Taylor University. Do you want to share a little bit about that, Barbara?
It's a small Christian university. In the beginning, 150 years ago, it started out as a girls' college, and now they've, got a lot of different majors and pre-med. We have a son that went through pre-med there, and another son that got a Bible degree from Taylor, and our daughter also went to Taylor. So. It's a very, very nice Christian university, a very good place to work, because everybody there are Christians, all the employees anyway.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Well, tell us a little bit about your children.
Well, we have, our daughter is the oldest, and then we have twin sons. And we're very proud of them. One of our sons is a doctor, the other is a teacher, and our daughter at this time is working in a court system in Indiana helping children that get into trouble so they won't go into the system. So making alternatives other than going into the prison system. So they're good kids. Good kids that are old.
And there's grandchildren too?
We have 7 grandchildren, 1 boy. The others are all girls. And 1 great-granddaughter who is 10 months old. Cute little thing.
We also have an adopted granddaughter. We adopted a family some years later in our lives, and she's still part of the family when we have the opportunity to get together.
And they come for all our holidays and celebrations and so forth, so they're part of the family.
Maybe this would be a good time to say something about Barbara's leadership of Cousin Camp.
Oh, please talk about that.
Yeah, it was a good thing. Did it for 10 years.
We heard about it. It's a Dawson thing. And so every year for 10 years, we invited all the grandkids to our house. And,
all at the same time, right?
All at the same time, yes. And we had like a church camp. You know, every morning we would start with devotions, and the kids would help with the meals, and we had treasure hunts and water gun fights and just all kinds of fun stuff, and the kids really bonded. You know, we have grandchildren in Florida and in Ohio and Indiana and Michigan at that time, so they probably wouldn't have known each other if it wasn't for us bringing them all together every year. They are still very close, so that's good.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
And maybe it's a legacy they'll carry on as well.
I hope so. We have talked about that.
They got to have kids, though.
Well, we have one.
Yeah.
Some things you don't have to rush too much.
Yeah,
No.
correct.
Jerry, what was your career path?
Well, I started out working a couple of years with the 3M sales outlet in Fort Wayne, and then went to work. They moved me to Marion, Indiana, and we got acquainted with Christian friends, new friends, and one of the friends worked at RCA, which is a picture tube manufacturing plant, and I went to worked there for 35 years. Got to see some of the world, Mexico City and Brazil, Sao Paulo, a couple of times each, and Barbara went with me on one occasion to Brazil, so it was a good, positive experience, even though whoever heard of a picture tube? You know, it's a thing.
Flat screen.
It was a good career.
You were there at the right time.
Yes, yes.
And what was your degree?
Degree was a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering Technology.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That was what I would have guessed, but you know, I guessed wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah.
He was the manager of the department he started in when he left, when he retired. And we did retire early, both of us did, and went on missions. We became missionaries in Kazakhstan. Our church had a group there, and so we joined the group, and we're the grandparents of the kids there in Kazakhstan. It was a really great experience. I worked with the orphanage. I started the orphanage, worked for the team. And when I first started, I started with just one orphanage, and we were humanitarian aid. That's what got us into the country, because Kazakhstan is a Muslim country, and they just don't allow missionaries there. So, and then by the time we left, it was only 3 years later, but I had 5 orphanages we were sponsoring at that time.
I think it was interesting when we were talking about this the other day about your training and preparation to go.
You want to talk about that?
Well, we needed a ticket to get into the country, and so I was encouraged to get a certificate in teaching English as a second language. And so after searching, we wound up in San Francisco and got that teaching certificate there, and there were so few pupils in the class, they invited Barbara to come, so we went through the class together, and that worked out really well when we got on site in Kazakhstan, because we team taught then several times. And after that, a wonderful experience in San Francisco, we went to Bakersfield, where Campus Crusade for Christ had a home. I guess that's where their home was at that time. I think it's Orlando now. And we lived with a black family and went to a black church. And that was one of the most positive experiences that we've ever had in our life. It was a great time, great experience.
Another thing, when we were in San Francisco, we lived in a what was it?
Residence club.
Residence club. And we didn't know before we got there, but when we got there, we found out that we were the only straight couple there. And that was a cultural experience. It was a good one. We met some really nice people there. One of the guys found out he had diabetes when we were there, and he didn't have money to get his supplies. And so he asked us if he could borrow some money from us, and we loaned it to him, expecting not to get it back. But he did. He gave it back before we left. So it was a good experience for us.
Yeah.
And then a part of your training also was to learn about the culture and in the country you were going.
That was the purpose of going to Campus Crusade, was the cultural training. All the teaching was by missionaries who had been around the world. We had 19 in our classroom. Campus Crusade insisted that their missionaries all go through that training, so we had some nice elbows to rub, really precious people. And all that, this is a good time to say, we're talking about our experiences, but the purpose and reason behind that is because Jesus' call on our lives. And so, although we share things about us, He's the purpose and He's the reason.
Absolutely.
And you've heard that a lot from previous interviews.
Yes.
So.
Well, the calling that we got, we had always kind of felt a little nudge, but it wasn't, wouldn't call it a calling. But one of our, I guess both of the twins went to a Christian rock festival. But one of them came back and said, "Mom and Dad, I don't have to go to college to be a missionary. I can do it right now." And we said, "I don't think so." So the next year we went to that Christian rock festival to check out what they were teaching our kids. And we heard the same message. But we heard that you don't have to go to a Bible college to be a missionary. You can go with the skills you already have. And with my computer skills and Jerry's leadership ability, we were already ready. So,
after we sensed that call, came from the head of Operation Mobilization out of England and also Atlanta, Peachtree. That guy's name is George Verwer, and he's still active out of England. They had 2 ships on the ocean that they asked for help with, and so at the Cornerstone Festival there in Chicago, they got called a lot of young people who went and served, and it was a good experience for us to search out and then go with our home church team.
And was the team together there the whole time you were, or did people come and go during that time on the team?
During that time we were there, the team stayed intact. After we left, they started leaving and transitioning.
Several of them have been on site for a while as a humanitarian aid company, and did a lot of work from a humanitarian aid situation or positions, such that they got a lot of cooperation from the government, local government officials, and they supplied coal and potatoes and funds, and what's some of the other things that?
They bought some of the offices, copy machines. And,
yeah.
And when you were considering going, were you offered different places to choose from, or was the call directly to there?
Well, we checked out a lot of different places, but most of them didn't know what to do with people our age. You know, like when I was 58 and you were...
I was 60.
61?
60.
Yeah. Anyway, something like that. They were used to young people. And my computer skills, they wanted that, but they didn't know what to do with his skills. Engineering, or being a manager wasn't one of the skills that they were looking for.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, our church does have a team. Maybe we should check that out. And so we did, and they were happy. They were happy to get us there.
Yeah, we went through a screening process that turned out okay. One of the big things that we experienced on our return, maybe you were going to ask about that too, was we didn't like cold weather in Indiana, so we sought out warmer climates. So we became winter Texans. And after the first year, we made a connection with a man by the name of Jack Henderson, missionary to Mexico, and we spent winter Texans working with him for about 14 years after that.
Let's go back a minute, though, because these are all fascinating stories, but the part where you actually went in country and bought your own home and what you had to do to make that, and I think not just building the home was what was fascinating to me, was the people you employed locally and your outreach to them as well.
Well, as you can imagine, housing was inexpensive there, and we found a house we rented, stayed in a home that had been bought by a previous couple for a while we looked for a home to buy, and we found one that was at the edge of town. And we hired 15 Kazakhs and Russians to do, they each had their own kind of skill. Hired one lady to be a cook so that they wouldn't go home at lunchtime and not come back.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's because they walked.
Yeah.
And so if they lived on the other side of town, it might take them, too long to walk all the way home and then walk all the way back. And so oftentimes they wouldn't come back.
And I believe you said this was in a rural area, small.
Yeah,
it was a village.
They called it a village, but it was 15,000 people. So that's, to me, is not what we consider a village.
But it's not a huge urban center.
No, it is not. And it's very traditionally Islamic at that point, very close to Christ. So anyway, we did have those individuals that worked for 2,000 tenge a week, which is and that was 6 days a week, early in the morning to late at night, for $14 a week. And they felt really good about that. So we had some really good skilled people, and I think I mentioned to you before, one of the neat things was the daughter of our cook was 12 years old at that time, and she'd gone to school and learned English words. And so we used her as a translator. And I guess she also took classes at the English Center. And long story short, she's working for the U.S. government now. She speaks with total Midwestern United States English.
Wonder where she got that.
Yeah. And she met her husband at church, in a church setting. So
she was one of the first converts, along with her mother, when we got there. They were baptized just a couple weeks after we arrived in Kazakhstan. So it was a good relationship.
Yeah.
And I know you had some other adventures while you were there as well. I believe you were talking about one time when there was some kind of unrest.
Oh, 9/11.
Oh, that's right. That was a big unrest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9/11 happened while we were there. In fact, we were the only people on the team that had access to a TV that had that on it. And everybody came over to our house to watch it after they found out, it was happening. And we had many Kazakhs that came to us and said, if you need help, if the government is going to, come and get Americans or whatever, said, come to us, we will hide you, we will take care of you, we will not let anybody harm you. So it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Now let's go back towards Mexico.
Okay. We searched for a place to serve. Didn't really come up with anything significant after our first year or during our first year. And we went to a church picnic in our little town of Upland that a local church had. And Barbara says she's often sensitive to the Holy Spirit. And there was this couple by themselves, and Barbara said, let's go sit with them and get to know them. So we chatted with them. They found out we had gone to Texas and said, you need to maybe you could get in touch with this missionary down there, Jack Henderson. He's kind of crazy and different, but he'd be good. Look him up. So we started communicating by emails, and we did arrive at his place. The first snow in 100 years. Stayed in his...
On Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve. Stayed in his driveway for a week.
In our camper.
I thought maybe you would add that.
We decided to go fifth wheeling at that point. So we had the good experiences in Mexico. Went there many, many, many times. He had a camp for young people, and near the end, he was turned his focus to pastors and their wives. Divorce rates extremely high amongst them because of the stress. And so we built cabins on the campgrounds for them to stay in for those weekend retreats.
Individuals, like motel rooms.
Yeah. And then when the mafia and drug people got intense, even to the camp, missionary pulled back. Americans didn't feel safe in coming anymore to help him, and he turned it over to 13 pastors, churches there. Big success now. And he built on his grounds then a retreat center.
In America.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a couple miles from the border. So, and that's where we helped him a lot during that 14 years.
So we had marriage enrichment weekends for the pastors and their wives. And a lot of the pastors, they get up in the morning and then they go out and minister to their congregation and to anybody. And the wives have to stay home and take care of the kids and have no money because pastors make almost nothing in Mexico. And so it's very stressful on the families. So this marriage enrichment, Jack and his wife, Ivedine, they teach men how to care for their wives. It's the biggest thing that he does, and it's just very good and very helpful. There's so many people that are so grateful. They have testimonies after it's over with. They have a renewing of the vows is the last thing they do, and then they do testimonies after that of what the weekend meant to them and so forth. And it was just very nice, very, very helpful for them.
Yeah.
Good.
I know that both of you have a number of interests, and one of them is art that you share. You want to tell us a little bit about that? And I know that you've had your artwork displayed at Village here.
Well, that's one of the things that we learned or picked up on as Winter Texans was friends that encouraged us to get into painting, and so I do oil paints, and Barbara's done.
I started with pastels, and then I went to watercolors, and then I went to acrylic. So
And that was all after buttons.
Yeah.
I know. Your button display is fantastic. Tell us.
Those are my grandmother's buttons. She belonged to the National Button Society. And went to conventions every year. Every summer they would have a convention in some state. I went with her one time when it was in Indiana. It was in Indianapolis. And so I got maybe about a third of her buttons, and another cousin got the rest. But it's really a good, I want to say, family type thing.
Yeah, she's made buttons, format cards, framed for all of our kids and grandkids, each one. So.
They're not making buttons like they used to, though. Those were beautiful works of art themselves, a lot of the buttons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hand-cut buttons and some with designs in them that were hand-done. And then some of them have semi-precious jewels in them. I don't know that I have very many of those, but my cousin probably got most of those.
You've lived at the village now. You live in Taylor Commons. About how long?
Almost 2 years. August it'll be 2 years.
And how did you find out about the village?
Well, we've been staying in a lot of campgrounds, and there's a lot of them that are not spiritual. I'll just say that. So we searched for a place that would have a good influence, a positive influence. And went on the internet to find, just...
We just thought Northern Florida sounded good to us because our son lives in Okeechobee, and that's too hot.
Too long.
and too far away from Indiana, too.
Yeah.
So Northern Florida, we were looking for, and so we checked out everything that we saw on the internet, Northern Florida, and Advent Christian Village was the best one. We really enjoyed it here. So many new friends and things to do. We were starting to get bored in Indiana. But now we get together with friends, we have meals, we play games, we go to the fitness center, and it's just been the best thing we've done for a while. Yeah.
It's a good thing for us.
Jerry, you had mentioned wanting to share. I asked about what was a life-changing experience for you.
Well, I know time is fleeting, but I was pretty hard-nosed, hard-headed about any kind of drum or rhythm in the church. In the beginning of Christian rock and contemporary music, and that was, my daughter challenged me on that one Sunday afternoon after church. We'd go in the living room, and she played a Christian, record for me, and it was all about me. It wasn't about Barbara. So yeah. Well, I did like music that had rhythm, but I didn't think it belonged in the church. And she asked me to listen to the lyrics of some songs, and that did impact my life. And I love hymns. I just would like them to have some rhythm or a beat so I don't go to sleep.
Well, it's our role as parents to help guide our children and lead them, but often the tables get turned and they point out things to us that are so important.
Yes, there's a couple of times during their young adult life that they were stronger Christians than we were. Not just being a religious person, but they had a relationship with the Lord, and that impacted us. That was good.
And I know that y'all are excited to get on with this interview so you can go back to the Copeland Center today.
Yes, we are.
Is there anything else you want to share with our viewers that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think we've covered. I'm sure when this is over and we're laying in bed tonight, there's going to be other things that we.
Oh, I should have said that.
Well, there's no reason we can't do this again.
Yeah. We did really enjoy our time with Jack Henderson and Ivy Dean in Texas, and disappointed that that's pretty much come to a close. It was
hard work, and we got tired.
Yeah.
And so that's when we started looking for something else.
We did get to know a guy by the name of Bob Harris, and he runs Bob's World, U.S. Shells, but a great man of God, puts his faith into action every day. So that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and I thank you for tuning in to watch today. And as our interview has gone, the birds have gotten more excited and are singing for us more than when we started. Again, thanks for tuning in.